I was celebrating my 62nd birthday at home when my granddaughter, just 10 years old, discreetly pressed a note into my hand. "Grandma, don't eat this." "Trust me," it read. I froze. I decided to switch my cupcake with my daughter-in-law's, and what happened 5 minutes later left me in shock. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Eleanor, and I never imagined that my birthday would be the day my life was saved, but also the day I would discover just how far family betrayal can go. James, my son, had planned a small party at his house. It was an intimate celebration. Just the four of us. Me, him, and Amanda, my daughter-in-law, along with Sophie, my 10-year-old granddaughter. Their house was cozy, tastefully decorated in shades of beige and blue colors Amanda always said matched the family's energy. The walls were adorned with family photographs, although I noticed that the pictures featuring just James and me had gradually diminished over the last few months. Small details that, looking back, should have alerted me. The atmosphere was pleasant that spring afternoon. The dining table had been set with care, featuring a lace tablecloth I had given them myself last Christmas. In the center sat a small arrangement of daisies, my favorite flowers, and 4 impeccably set places. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, creating a golden, welcoming ambiance that contrasted sharply with what was about to happen. Amanda had prepared my favorite dishes: roast chicken with herbs, scalloped potatoes, and a fresh green salad. For dessert, she had made chocolate cupcakes with cream cheese frosting, a recipe I had taught her during the early years of her marriage to James. At that moment, I interpreted it as a gesture of affection, a way to honor me. How naive I was. "Mom, you look wonderful today," James said, hugging me as I arrived. His eyes shone with that genuine affection that always warmed my heart. Amanda greeted me with her usual restrained smile, a quick peck on each cheek, and a hug that always felt more perfunctory than affectionate. Sophie, however, was different. Usually chatty and cheerful, the child seemed tense, almost frightened. Her big brown eyes avoided contact with mine, and when Amanda asked her to give me a hug, she did so with a stiffness that intrigued me. I attributed her behavior to some family argument or a problem at school. Children often carry small worlds of worry that we adults cannot imagine. Dinner passed with apparent normality. We talked about everyday topics: James's work at the insurance company, the yoga classes for seniors I had started attending, Sophie's progress in middle school. Amanda spoke little, but that wasn't unusual. I always considered her a more reserved woman, although now I realize I confused calculating coldness with shyness. I noticed, however, small, unsettling details. The way Amanda checked her cell phone repeatedly under the table, the way her eyes fixed on me when she thought I wasn't looking, the nervous tapping of her fingers on the table and, more disturbing, the exchanges of glances between her and James. Glances that seemed to carry messages I couldn't decipher. "Time to sing happy birthday," James announced after the meal, bringing the cupcakes on a decorative tray. Instead of a traditional cake, Amanda had prepared several cupcakes, and one of them had a small plastic crown on top. I thought the gesture was touching, ignoring the inner voice asking why there were no candles to blow out. It was when we started singing Happy Birthday that Sophie, sitting next to me, took advantage of her parents' distraction to slip a small piece of paper into my hand. The movement was so discreet and fast that neither James nor Amanda noticed. The little girl shot me an intense, almost pleading look before returning to sing with a forcedly animated voice. With my heart racing, not knowing why, I kept the paper closed in my hand. I waited until James went to get the camera and Amanda went to the kitchen to get plates to serve the cupcakes. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper under the table, keeping it hidden from everyone. The message, written in Sophie's childish but urgent handwriting, read, "Grandma, don't eat the cupcake. Your life is in danger. Trust me." Her handwriting looked desperate, as if she had written it in a great hurry. The world seemed to stop. The sound of everything around me turned into a distant hum. I looked at the cupcake in front of me, so innocent, so tempting. My eyes met Sophie's, who was watching me intensely, her small head tilting in an almost imperceptible motion of denial. My first reaction was disbelief. Surely my granddaughter was imagining things, but something in Sophie's eyes, a genuine urgency and fear, made me hesitate. I quickly put the note in my pants pocket when Amanda returned with the plates. Her smile seemed normal, but now I saw her differently. There was something predatory about her, something calculating that sent a shiver down my spine. "Grandma, pick your cupcake," Sophie said in a strangely emphatic voice. Her eyes were fixed on mine, trying to communicate something more. Amanda intervened quickly. "No, sweetie, I already set aside a special one for Grandma. This one right here, with the little crown, made with extra love." She pushed the cupcake toward me. Her eyes darted nervously between my cupcake and my face. It was as if she were waiting for me to eat it, but I waited for the right moment and made a decision that would change everything. Taking advantage of a moment when everyone was distracted by a funny story my son was telling, I discreetly removed the little crown from my cupcake and switched it with Amanda's. It was a quick movement, almost imperceptible. When I spoke about eating the cupcakes, my son said, "Let's make a toast first," proposing as he raised his glass of wine. "To Mom, the strongest and most loving woman I know, happy birthday." We toasted, we drank, and then Amanda suggested that we all bite into our cupcakes together for a photo. I pretended to bring mine to my mouth, but I didn't bite it. I watched closely as Amanda took a generous bite of what was supposed to be my cupcake. Exactly 10 minutes of normal conversation passed. We were reminiscing about old stories when I noticed the first change in Amanda. Her forehead began to glisten with a light sweat, despite the cool air conditioning. Her hands, usually so controlled, trembled slightly as she held her glass of water. "Are you okay, honey?" James asked, noticing her sudden paleness. "I think so," she replied with a weak voice. "Maybe something I ate didn't agree with me." Her eyes met mine for a second, a look of confusion that quickly transformed into horrified realization. She knew I had switched the cupcakes, and now she was feeling the effects of whatever she had put in mine. Sophie watched the scene with wide eyes, a mixture of fear and relief on her small face. My heart broke for her. What a burden for such a young child to discover that her own mother was capable of such evil. "I don't feel well," Amanda murmured, standing up abruptly. Her legs gave out almost immediately, and James barely had time to catch her before she fell. "Amanda," he shouted, panic evident in his voice. "What's happening? You're so pale." She couldn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, and she began to shake uncontrollably, a cold sweat covering her now grayish face. "Call 911, I ordered, maintaining calm despite the chaos I felt inside. "Now, James." While my son ran to the phone, I beside Amanda, not out of compassion, although part of me was horrified by what I was witnessing, but to ensure she survived to face the consequences of her actions. Sophie approached me, trembling. "Grandma," she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I heard Mom talking on the phone last night saying she had gotten a strong heart medication and was going to put it in your cupcake. She said no one would suspect because you were already forgetting things. I hugged my granddaughter tightly, shielding her from the horror unfolding in front of us. "You did the right thing, my love. You saved my life." The ambulance ride to the hospital was a nightmare. Amanda had lost consciousness completely. The paramedics worked frantically, talking about digoxin and possible poisoning. James was in shock, torn between fear for his wife and confusion about what had actually happened. "Mom, what is going on?" he asked me in the back of the ambulance, his voice breaking. "How did this happen?" I held Sophie's note in my pocket, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. But before I could answer, we arrived at the hospital, and the urgency of saving Amanda postponed the conversation that would change our family forever. While the doctors fought to stabilize her, I sat in the cold, impersonal waiting room, with Sophie asleep in my lap and the weight of the truth pressing on my heart. What would I tell James? How would I explain that his wife, the woman he loved, had tried to kill me? And most importantly, how would I protect my granddaughter from the consequences of having exposed her own mother? The fluorescent lights of the hospital seemed to intensify the unreality of the situation. A few hours ago, we were celebrating my birthday. Now, I was about to unravel a plot of family betrayal that none of us could ever have imagined. The doctor who attended to us seemed too young to carry the weight of the news he brought. His dark eyes showed a seriousness that made my heart race with apprehension. "Mrs. Patterson," he addressed me, "I'm Dr. Roberts. We need to talk about Mrs. Miller's condition." James, who was sitting next to me holding Sophie's hand, stood up immediately. "How is my wife, doctor?" Is she going to be okay? The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She is stable for now, but we found something very worrying in her blood work. He looked at Sophie, who was awake but quiet, her big eyes observing everything. Maybe we should speak in private. Sophie can stay with the nurse in the children's area, I suggested, realizing the child shouldn't hear the technical details of what her mother had done. After they took Sophie, the doctor led us to a small consultation room. The smell of disinfectant was oppressive, almost suffocating, as we sat on the cold plastic chairs. Mrs. Miller's blood tests showed alarming levels of digoxin, explained Dr. Roberts. It's a medication used to treat heart conditions, but in the quantity we found in her system, it is potentially lethal. James went pale, his expression a mixture of confusion and horror. Digoxin? Amanda doesn't have heart problems. How did this? Why? That is exactly the question, Mr. Miller. Your wife shouldn't have digoxin in her system, and the amount we found... The doctor paused significantly. Well, it didn't get there by accident. It was at that moment I realized I couldn't postpone the truth any longer. With trembling hands, I took Sophie's note from my pocket and handed it to James. Son. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. Sophie gave me this before we cut the cupcakes. James read the note. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He looked at me, then at the doctor, an expression of total disbelief on his face. No, it can't be, he murmured. Amanda, never. She wouldn't do this. I switched the cupcakes. James, I confessed, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders with the truth. What Amanda is feeling now is what I would be feeling if I had eaten what she prepared for me. The doctor watched our interaction with a grave expression. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Patterson, I will have to report this to the police. Poisoning is a serious matter, especially considering the toxicity levels we found. James seemed to have aged 10 years in a few minutes. There must be some mistake, he insisted, though his voice had lost its conviction. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she confused the ingredients. Son, I said softly, you know it wasn't an accident. Sophie heard Amanda talking about this on the phone. And think carefully, haven't you noticed changes in my behavior in recent months? Confusion, forgetfulness, dizziness. His face showed the exact moment realization hit him. Oh my God, he whispered. Amanda had been telling me you were showing signs of early dementia, that we needed to consider assisted living options for you. He covered his face with his hands, and I believed her. Dr. Roberts intervened gently. Mr. Miller, we would like to run blood tests on your mother as well. If your wife has been administering digoxin to Mrs. Patterson for some time, we need to evaluate the potential damage to her heart. I agreed immediately. While the doctor left to prepare the tests, I remained alone with my son. An abyss of betrayal and horror lay between us. Mom. James finally spoke, his voice choked. How could this happen? Why? Why would Amanda do something like this to you? Money, probably, I replied, feeling a strange calm now that the truth was coming to light. Remember the inheritance I received from Aunt Margaret 6 months ago? That was when the forgetfulness started, when Amanda started visiting me more, always bringing tea or food prepared especially for me. James looked physically struck by my words. She was planning to kill you and use my name, our relationship, to get your money. And Sophie discovered it. I added, imagine the burden that child has carried, discovering what her own mother was doing. At that moment, the door opened, and a middle-aged woman entered, followed by a uniformed officer. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Miller. We need to talk about what happened today. The following hours were a blur of statements, blood tests, and interrogations. Detective Miller was meticulous and compassionate, especially when talking to Sophie. The child, brave beyond her years, recounted how she had woken up the previous night thirsty and had heard her mother on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking about Grandma, Sophie explained, her little voice trembling slightly. She said she had gotten a strong medicine that would make it look natural, that Grandma was already showing signs of confusion, and no one would suspect. Her eyes filled with tears. I knew it was wrong. Mom always taught me that poisoning is bad. In stories, only the villains poison people. The moral simplicity of a 10-year-old contrasted painfully with the complexity of adult betrayal. While Sophie spoke, I held her hand, marveling at her bravery and clarity of thought. My blood test results confirmed our suspicions. There were traces of digoxin in my system, not enough to be fatal, but clearly indicating that I had been gradually poisoned over weeks, perhaps months. Chronic poisoning with digoxin can cause confusion, memory problems, fatigue, explained Dr. Roberts. Symptoms easily attributable to age or early dementia, especially by family members without medical training. Detective Miller took detailed notes. Mr. Miller, did your wife ever suggest changes to your mother's will or finances? James looked shattered as he answered. Yes, 2 weeks ago she managed to get my mother to sign a power of attorney that gave me control over her finances in case her condition worsened. I thought we were helping, and where are those documents now? In our safe at home, along with other important papers. The detective asked James to retrieve those papers as soon as possible. We'll need to investigate when they were drafted and who prepared them. Documents obtained under false pretenses or coercion are legally invalid. While this conversation was happening, I watched Sophie, who had curled up in a chair in the corner of the room. Her small shoulders carried an immense weight. She had reported her own mother, something no child should ever have to do. I approached her and knelt down, ignoring the pain in my knees. Sophie, my love, I want you to know you did the right thing. You were very, very brave. Her eyes, so much like James's, met mine. Mom is going to prison. How to answer that? How to explain to a child that yes, her mother would likely go to prison for trying to kill her grandmother, that our family would never be the same again. I don't know what's going to happen to your mother, I answered honestly, but I know that you, your dad, and I will be together. We will take care of each other no matter what happens. She nodded, an understanding beyond her age in her eyes. Mom did something very bad, didn't she? Yes, honey, I replied, holding her small hands in mine. But that doesn't mean you did anything bad by telling us. You saved my life, Sophie. That night, none of us returned home. James and Sophie stayed with me at a hotel near the hospital. None of us wanted to face the house that now seemed contaminated by Amanda's betrayal. Sophie slept between us in a large bed, her breathing finally calm after hours of crying. In the darkness of the room, James whispered to me, Mom, how are we going to move forward after this? How do we explain to Sophie that her mother tried? He couldn't finish the sentence. Day by day, I replied, feeling the weight and wisdom of my 62 years. That is how we continue, one delay at a time, with truth and love. As Sophie slept between us, a symbol of innocence amidst betrayal, I promised myself that somehow we would find a way through this nightmare, not just for me, not just for James, but mostly for this brave girl who had sacrificed so much to do what was right. The next morning, we were informed that Amanda had regained consciousness. Her condition was stable, although the doctors continued to monitor her heart closely. Detective Miller suggested I confront her with police present to record any confession or incriminating statement. I'm not sure I can face her, I confessed, feeling a tremor in my hands at the thought of looking into the eyes of the woman who had methodically planned my death. I understand completely, replied the detective kindly, but your direct testimony would be invaluable to the case. And frankly, Mrs. Patterson, many victims find a certain closure in confronting their attackers. James offered to go with me, but we decided Sophie should stay with a social worker during that visit. The child had already faced enough trauma, and seeing her would certainly destabilize Amanda, potentially compromising the interrogation. Walking down the hospital corridors toward Amanda's room, I felt as if I were walking to my own execution. The smell of disinfectant seemed stronger, the fluorescent lights harsher. James held my arm, but I didn't know if it was to support me or to seek strength. 2 uniformed police officers guarded the door to the room. Inside, Amanda was pale against the white sheets, IV tubes connected to her arm. When she saw us, her face showed a bewildering mix of emotions, surprise, fear, and then, quickly, a mask of concern. And vulnerability. Eleanor, she said with a weak voice, extending a hand toward me. Thank God you're okay. I was so scared. The ease with which she assumed the role of the concerned victim left me momentarily speechless. It was as if we were in completely different realities. No, Amanda, I replied finally, keeping my distance from the bed. We are not doing this. We know what you did. Sophie heard your phone conversation. We know about the digoxin. At the mention of Sophie, I saw the first flash of genuine shock on her face. She hadn't considered that her stepdaughter could be the source of the report. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, but her voice had lost the feigned fragility. "I'm confused. The doctor said I was poisoned. How can you accuse me of something like that when I am the victim?" James, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "We found the bottles, Amanda, in the back of your lingerie drawer. Digoxin, prescribed to a patient who doesn't exist. That was a bluff. We hadn't searched the house yet, but her reaction confirmed everything. Her face went even paler, and for an instant, I saw panic in her eyes. "You don't understand," she said, changing tactics. "We were trying to help Eleanor. She's confused. She's losing her memory. You saw it yourself, James. Her episodes are becoming more frequent." "There were no episodes," James replied, his voice shaking with contained rage. "It was you, poisoning her slowly, making us believe she was developing dementia." "Why, Amanda? For her money? For the house?" Amanda kept silent for a long moment, evaluating her options. Detective Miller, observing from the corner, stepped closer. "Mrs. Miller, we have enough evidence to arrest you for attempted murder. Mrs. Patterson's blood tests show chronic digoxin poisoning. Your own blood shows a near-fatal dose of the same substance. And we have your stepdaughter's testimony. Your cooperation now could be considered at sentencing." Something shifted in Amanda's eyes. A surrender, perhaps, or a cold recalculation of her chances. She leaned back into the pillows, suddenly appearing more composed, almost professional. "Eleanor is old," she said simply, as if stating a weather fact. "She's what, 62? How much more useful and dignified life would she have left? 5 years? 10? And then what? Diapers, confusion, a burden to all of us." Her words hit me like physical blows. The cruelty, the way she had reduced my existence to an inconvenience with an expiration date. "I was offering her a merciful exit," Amanda continued. "A quiet death, without pain, without the indignity of deterioration. And yes, then James would have the inheritance, which is his right as an only child. He could finally leave that mediocre job. We could give Sophie the education she deserves." "You tried to kill me," I said, finding my voice. "Finally, you got close to me. You pretended you cared while you poisoned me little by little. How could you, Amanda? I trusted you." For the first time, something resembling genuine emotion crossed her face. Not remorse, but a kind of impatient irritation. "Please, Eleanor, don't be so dramatic. Do you think you're special? You're just an old woman with money. There are thousands like you clinging to resources that could benefit the younger generation." James surged forward, his face contorted with fury. "Shut up. How can you speak about my mother like that? How could you do this to us, to Sophie? Did you think about how this would affect your own daughter?" "Sophie is young," Amanda replied coldly. "She'll get over it. Children are resilient." Detective Miller signaled to the officer recording the conversation. "I think we have enough. Mrs. Miller, you are formally under arrest for the attempted murder of Eleanor Patterson. You have the right to remain silent." As the detective recited the Miranda rights, I watched Amanda's face. There was no repentance there, only a kind of cold calculation, as if she were still evaluating angles, looking for a way out. Her eyes met mine one last time, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Not hate or rage, but total indifference toward my value as a human being. We left the room in silence, James and I, holding each other up. In the hallway, away from Amanda's ears, he crumbled, leaning against the wall and sliding to the floor. "How did I not see it?" he sobbed, covering his face with his hands. "How could I be so blind? She was poisoning my mother right under my nose. And I not only didn't realize it, but I helped her by believing the lies about dementia." I knelt beside him, ignoring the pain in my old knees, and held his face between my hands. "Son, you had no way of knowing. Amanda is manipulative. It's what she does. She fooled us all. But I'm your son," he insisted, his voice choked. "I should protect you. Instead, I was planning to put you in a nursing home because I thought you were going senile." Detective Miller approached, offering tissues to James and giving us a moment to recover. "Mr. Miller," she said kindly, "people like your wife are experts in manipulation. They construct lies so convincing that even trained professionals can be deceived. Don't blame yourself." We returned to the hotel where Sophie waited with the social worker. The child ran into her father's arms as soon as she saw us, and my heart clenched seeing the bond between them, something genuine and pure amidst so much falsehood. The following days were a blur of police statements, consultations with lawyers, and long conversations with psychologists, especially for Sophie. Amanda was transferred from the hospital to jail as soon as her health allowed. She was formally charged with first-degree attempted murder. The investigation revealed horrors we hadn't even imagined. On her computer, police found extensive searches about digoxin poisoning, symptoms of dementia, and how to forge legal documents. There were also emails exchanged with a real estate agent about selling my house, something that would be possible as soon as the power of attorney she made me sign went into effect. Even more disturbing were the conversations with a man named Ralph, apparently an ex-boyfriend with whom she had kept in touch. In the messages, she discussed her plans openly. The old lady won't last more than 2 months. I already got the power of attorney. When they commit her for dementia, we'll sell the house and be free. In other messages, she detailed how she was gradually increasing the digoxin doses, complaining that I was tougher than she expected. When the detective showed me this evidence, I felt a deep nausea, not just at the horror of what had been planned, but at the calculating coldness with which Amanda had orchestrated everything. How could someone reduce another human being, someone with whom she shared meals, celebrated birthdays, built memories, to nothing more than an obstacle to be eliminated? "It's more common than you imagine," the detective said when I expressed my shock. "We have cases of poisoning by family members almost every month. Usually, it's for money, sometimes revenge. What makes Amanda's case unusual is the level of planning and her patience. One night, about a week after the incident, Sophie came to my room in the temporary apartment we had rented. James had finally fallen asleep after days of insomnia, and the child should have been sleeping too. "Grandma," she whispered, her big eyes in the gloom, "can I tell you something?" I made space for her on the bed, and she curled up against me like she did when she was smaller. "Of course, my love. You can tell me anything." "I think I knew Mom was doing something bad for a while," she confessed, her voice almost inaudible. "She changed after you got that money from Great Aunt Margaret. She started talking about how you were getting old, how we needed to prepare for when you couldn't take care of yourself anymore." My heart broke thinking of the burden this child had carried. "Why didn't you say anything before, sweetie?" Sophie stayed silent for a moment. "Because she was my mom," she replied finally. "You're always supposed to trust your mom, right? But then..." Her voice broke. "Then you heard her on the phone," I completed gently. She nodded against my shoulder. She was laughing, Grandma. Laughing while she talked about how she was going to put the medicine in your special cupcake, saying it would be poetic for you to die on your own birthday. A small sob escaped her. How can a mom do something like that? There was no adequate answer to that question. How to explain to a 10-year-old that some people are born without the capacity to feel empathy, without that fundamental connection that makes us human? How to make sense of what I couldn't comprehend myself? "Some people are sick inside, Sophie," I said finally. "Not in a way we can see, like when you have a fever or a sore throat. It's a sickness in the soul that makes them unable to love or worry about others the way they should." Mom didn't love me either. The vulnerability in that question shattered my heart. "Honey, I don't know if Amanda is capable of loving anyone the way you and I understand love, but I know your dad loves you more than anything in the world, and I love you too, my brave girl." She remained silent for a long moment, processing this with the wisdom beyond her years that children facing trauma often develop. "Can I sleep here with you tonight, Grandma?" "Of course you can, my love." As Sophie fell asleep in my arms, I contemplated the uncertain future ahead of us. Amanda's trial, the inevitable divorce, the emotional scars we would all carry, especially this little warrior who had been forced to choose between loyalty to her mother and doing what was right. But beneath the pain and betrayal, there was a thread of hope. The three of us, James, Sophie, and I, had been united by this terrible experience in a way that perhaps wouldn't have been possible otherwise. The lies had been exposed, the manipulation eliminated. What remained was real, genuine love, based not on false pretenses or hidden agendas, but on a shared truth, however painful. "We will get through this," I whispered to the sleeping Sophie, a promise to her and to myself. Together, we would find a way through this darkness, Amanda's trial began 6 months after my fateful birthday, half a year of emotional and legal preparation, of therapy sessions and sleepless nights. Half a year of rebuilding our small family from the rubble of betrayal. The courthouse was an imposing gray stone building, cold and formal, like the justice system it represented. I sat in the front row with James by my side and Sophie between us, all dressed in formal clothes with solemn expressions. The prosecutor, a middle-aged woman named Sarah Jenkins, had prepared us meticulously for this moment, but nothing could really prepare us to see Amanda enter escorted, dressed in a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back in a strict bun. She seemed smaller somehow, stripped of the power she once wielded over our lives. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, stopping briefly on us. When her gaze met Sophie's, I saw something I had never noticed before, a spark of something almost human, quickly suppressed. The judge, the Honorable Catherine Stone, was a woman of commanding presence and piercing gaze. "We are here for the case of the state versus Amanda Miller, charged with first-degree attempted murder, elder abuse, poisoning, forgery, and fraud." Her voice resonated in the silent room. My testimony was first. I walked to the witness stand with steps I hoped looked firmer than I felt. As I swore to tell the truth, I noticed how wrinkled my hands looked under the bright courtroom lights, hands that had cooked for Amanda, that had held newborn Sophie, that now trembled slightly as they were raised for the oath. The prosecutor guided me through the narrative of events with professional delicacy. I told of the forgetfulness that began after receiving Aunt Margaret's inheritance, about how Amanda started visiting me more frequently, always bringing food or tea, about how I gradually began to feel confused, doubting my own mind. "Mrs. Patterson," the prosecutor asked, "what were your symptoms during that period? Dizziness, confusion, extreme fatigue?" I replied, feeling the weight of the memories. There were days when I couldn't remember what I had done in the morning, moments when I got lost in the middle of a sentence. I started to think I was developing dementia like my husband. And did these symptoms occur with any specific pattern? They always worsened after Amanda's visits. At the time, I attributed it to the excitement of having company. Now I know it was because she was putting digoxin in my food or drink. The defense naturally tried to discredit my testimony. Amanda's lawyer, a thin man with calculating eyes, insinuated that I might really be suffering from early dementia and that the accusations were the result of mental confusion. He suggested that perhaps I had put the digoxin in Amanda's cupcake in a moment of paranoia. "Mrs. Patterson," he asked with false solicitude, "isn't it true that your own mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 63? Just 1 year older than your current age." I maintained my composure, though I felt my face heat up with indignation. "My mother had Alzheimer's, yes. But unlike her condition, my symptoms started and stopped according to your client's presence in my life. And curiously, they disappeared completely after my poisoned birthday." The medical results spoke for themselves. Toxicology reports clearly showed the presence of digoxin in my system not at lethal levels, but consistent with chronic poisoning. Dr. Roberts' testimony confirmed that my symptoms were totally compatible with digoxin intoxication, not dementia. But it was Sophie's testimony that silenced the courtroom. Small and solemn in her navy blue dress, she spoke with a clarity that made several jurors wipe their eyes. "I heard my mom on the phone," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "She was laughing about putting medicine in Grandma's special cupcake. She said it would be her last birthday." "And what did you do after hearing that, Sophie?" the prosecutor asked gently. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered what my teacher always says about seeing something bad. If you see something, say something. So I wrote a note to Grandma. "That was a very brave decision," the prosecutor commented. "You were afraid of what might happen." Sophie looked directly at Amanda for the first time. "I was afraid Grandma would die. And I was afraid Mom would be mad at me. But Grandma always taught me that we have to do the right thing, even when it's hard." In the weeks that followed, the trial revealed the full extent of Amanda's plans. Forensic experts recovered deleted emails, search histories, and text messages that painted a picture of meticulously planned manipulation. The medical evidence was unquestionable. The legal documents she had made me sign were clearly obtained under coercion and false pretenses. Even more devastating was the discovery, through Detective Miller's deeper investigation, that Amanda had done this before. An elderly woman in California, a distant cousin of her first husband, had died under similar circumstances 3 years earlier. Elena Gomez, 76, had left a modest inheritance to Amanda after a sudden degenerative illness. Family members had been suspicious, but without concrete proof, nothing could be done at the time. The pattern is identical, the detective explained in court. Gradual approach, gaining trust, suggestions of mental deterioration, isolating the victim from other relatives, modified legal documents, and finally, a death that appeared natural. When it was Amanda's turn to testify, her strategy had changed. She was no longer the confident manipulator I had confronted in the hospital. Now she presented herself as a broken woman, a victim of childhood abuse, suffering from borderline personality disorder that made her unable to fully comprehend the morality of her actions. "I just wanted the best for our family," she said, tears falling perfectly down her face. James was unhappy in his job. Sophie needed a better education. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just saw a solution to our problems. I watched her performance with a mixture of fascination and repulsion. There was something almost admirable in the way she could reinvent herself, adapting her personality to circumstances like a chameleon. If it weren't for the mountain of evidence against her, I might almost have believed her contrition. The jurors were not fooled. After just 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with the verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentence, 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, considering the premeditation and the history of similar behavior. When the judge announced the sentence, I felt a strange absence of triumph. There was no joy in seeing a life wasted that way, only a deep weariness and a desire to move on. Sophie cried silently next to James, not out of sadness for her mother's conviction, but out of relief for the end of the nightmare. Leaving the courthouse that day under the clear autumn sky, I realized we were finally free, not just from the physical threat Amanda posed, but from the emotional power she had wielded over us. "What do we do now?" James asked as we walked to the car, Sophie holding our hands between us, forming a small human chain of survivors. "We live," I replied simply. "We heal. We rebuild." In the months following the trial, we did exactly that. James sold the house where he had lived with Amanda. None of us could stand the memories impregnated in those walls. He found a cheerful apartment with large windows that filled the rooms with light. Sophie changed schools, a fresh start where she wouldn't be the girl whose mother tried to kill her grandmother. I made changes too. I sold my old house, full of memories now tainted, and bought a small 2-bedroom house near James's apartment. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I always wanted to do but had never found the time or energy for. There was something deeply therapeutic about sinking my hands into the earth, nurturing new life after having been so close to death. Sophie spent afternoons with me after school while James worked. Together, we baked cakes and cookies, reclaiming our culinary traditions from the poison of betrayal. I taught her to knit, to play chess, to recognize constellations in the night sky. In return, she taught me to use a tablet, to play her favorite video games, to understand the complexities of the music young people listen to nowadays. Gradually, the wounds began to heal. Not perfectly, there would always be scars, but enough for us to find joy again, for us to trust, albeit with caution. A year after the cupcake incident, we celebrated my 63rd birthday. It was a simple party in the garden of my new house, just the 3 of us, plus a few new friends I had made in the support group for survivors of elder abuse I had started attending. James grilled, and Sophie had decorated the patio with colored lanterns. There were no cupcakes. I think we could never look at one again without remembering. Instead, Sophie and James prepared a simple chocolate cake. When the candles were lit, I looked at the faces around me, illuminated by the golden light. Faces of people who loved me genuinely, without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. "Make a wish, Grandma," Sophie said, her eyes shining. I closed my eyes and wished for what we had already begun to build. A life of truth, of restored trust, of love that heals. When I blew out the candles, I felt not only the weight of my 63 years but also the lightness of someone who has gained a second chance. It has been 3 years since the birthday that was almost my last. Today, at 65, I find myself reflecting on everything that has changed and everything I have learned about trust, betrayal, and surprisingly, forgiveness. James found a new love. Karen is a literature professor at the local university, a woman with an easy laugh and kind eyes who entered our lives like a fresh breeze after a storm. At first, James was reluctant, carrying the weight of guilt and fear. "What if I can't see the signs again?" he confessed to me one night. "What if my judgment is permanently compromised?" "Son," I replied, holding his hands, "what happened wasn't a failure of your judgment. It was the result of Amanda's exceptional ability to manipulate and deceive. And now, all of us have sharper lie detectors. When Karen came to dinner at my house for the first time, I watched her with eyes trained by bitter experience. But where Amanda had shown calculated smiles and superficial interest, Karen offered genuine laughter and sincere curiosity. Where Amanda had isolated James from me, Karen encouraged our relationship, often suggesting activities for the three of us, and soon for the four of us, including Sophie. Sophie, now 13, blossomed under her father's constant care and my unconditional love. Therapy helped her process her mother's betrayal and understand that it hadn't been her fault. "You made the bravest and most correct decision possible," her therapist assured her repeatedly. "You saved your grandmother and helped your mother face the consequences of her choices." There are still difficult days, of course. Days when Sophie comes home from school with red eyes because some cruel kid mentioned her murderer mom. Days when she wonders if she could also become like Amanda, a fear we address immediately with love and therapy. Kindness isn't just something we are born with, I explained to her during one of those crises. It is also a choice we make every day, and you, my dear, make that choice constantly. Amanda's life in prison remains a peripheral presence in our lives. She writes letters occasionally to James, to Sophie, even to me. The first ones were manipulative, full of self-victimization and subtle attempts to sow discord. "Your father never tells you the full truth, Sophie," she wrote once. "Ask him about our secret bank account." There was no secret account, just another attempt to create mistrust. Over time, when her manipulations got no response, the letters became more honest, or at least as honest as someone like Amanda can be. "I don't know why I did what I did," she wrote in her most recent letter. "There is something broken in me that I can't fix." James reads the letters, occasionally responds with simple updates about Sophie's life, but keeps firm boundaries. Sophie, after careful consideration and discussions with her therapist, decided not to read her mother's letters until she feels emotionally ready, perhaps when she is older. I, surprisingly, responded to one of Amanda's letters. Not out of a desire for reconciliation or an unresolved need for confrontation, but for something more complex, a desire to understand the incomprehensible. "Why me?" I asked her directly. "Of all the people with resources you could have chosen as a target, why your husband's mother?" Her answer arrived weeks later, written in handwriting strangely childish for a woman of her intelligence. "You were there. You trusted me. It was easy." The cruelty of those words hit me in a way not even her previous actions had. The randomness of it could have been anyone with money who crossed her path and let their guard down. This understanding brought with it a strange kind of liberation. Amanda's betrayal was never really about me, my flaws, my naivety, my vulnerabilities. It was about the voids inside her that nothing could fill. With this understanding came not exactly forgiveness, but a kind of detachment. I no longer needed to carry anger as armor against future betrayals. Instead, I redirected my energy towards something more constructive. Together with 2 other survivors of elder abuse I met in the support group, I founded a small organization called Silver Watch. Our goal is to educate seniors and their families about the signs of financial and physical abuse, especially when it comes from close and trusted people. We visit community centers, assisted living facilities, and retiree groups, sharing our stories and providing concrete resources. Isolation is the first tactic, we explain. If someone is trying to limit your access to other loved ones or friends, that is a red flag. More importantly, we emphasize that there is no shame in having been deceived. Manipulators are experts at what they do, I say in every talk. They study your vulnerabilities, gain your trust, and exploit exactly what you value most often, your love for your family. Our work generated unexpected interest from local media. A newspaper did a report on us, which led to a TV interview. Suddenly, I was receiving emails and calls from people all over the country who had gone through similar experiences or suspected something was wrong in their families. "My daughter-in-law insists I'm getting confused," wrote a 7-8-year-old woman. "But I only feel that way after she brings me her special tea." We guided this lady to seek medical help immediately and contact the authorities. Weeks later, she wrote to us again, confirming that toxicology tests had detected sedatives in her system. This work became my mission, my way of transforming betrayal into something meaningful. Every person we help protect is a small victory against what Amanda represents: the exploitation of the vulnerable by those who should care for them. At home, our expanded little family found new rhythms and traditions. Karen moved into James's apartment last year, bringing her collection of antique books and a black cat named Shakespeare. Sophie, initially cautious with this new maternal figure, gradually lowered her defenses when she realized Karen had no interest in replacing anyone, neither her biological mother nor the special relationship she had with me. Our Sunday nights became sacred. We gather for dinner, sometimes at my house, sometimes at their apartment, and each of us shares a moment of gratitude from the week. It is a simple practice, but it keeps us anchored in the present, appreciating what we have instead of ruminating on the past. "I'm grateful for my new friend Lucy," Sophie shared recently. "She was the only one in class who defended me when Michael made that joke about my mom being in jail." "I'm grateful for your strength, Sophie," James said, his eyes shining with pride. "You teach me every day what it means to have courage." "I am grateful for these moments," added Karen, "for this family that has welcomed me with so much love." When it was my turn, I looked at the faces around the table. My son, who had found the strength to trust again. My granddaughter, whose bravery at 10 years old had saved my life. And Karen, who entered our broken family with nothing but genuine love. "I am grateful for the second chance," I said simply, "for being alive to see this moment." Later that night, alone in my house, I contemplated the garden I had planted 3 years ago. The timid seeds had transformed into a small paradise of colors and life. Climbing roses covered the back wall. Sunflowers leaned toward the light. Aromatic herbs grew in pots painted by hand by Sophie. It was a metaphor so obvious it almost made me smile. From the poisoned soil of betrayal, we had created something new and beautiful. Not perfect. There were still weeds to pull, dry seasons to get through, but genuinely ours. At 65, I learned that trust, once broken, is never fully restored in the same way. It grows differently, more cautious perhaps, but also more valued for knowing what it means to lose it. Like a bone that heals after a fracture, it can become stronger exactly at the point where it broke. Surrounded by my family, I felt a deep gratitude for the journey we had traveled together. It wasn't the path any of us would have chosen, marked as it was by betrayal and near tragedy. But it was our path, and we had walked it with courage, with love, with a determination that surprised us all. 5 years after the cupcake that almost took my life, I no longer defined myself as a victim or even just a survivor. I was simply Eleanor, mother, grandmother, defender of important causes, a woman who lives each day with an intensity I might never have discovered if death hadn't passed so close. Life continues, always. Sometimes broken, sometimes repaired, but always precious, always infinitely precious. Now, if you liked this story, click on this next video appearing on the screen, because in it, there's a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before. Yeah,